Welcome to the studio review for React Part 3. This one, again, uses this topic of a recipe, and it actually, rather than kind of picking up where the Part 2 studio left off, it really kind of picks up more where studio for Part 1 left off, except they've moved some things around. There are actually only a couple of components, and all of the things that you had previously are now all, together in this recipe.js file. So, the focus of tonight's class was about managing state and making handlers change things on the page so that the components re-render and the user is presented with new information as they interact with the page. So we're going to take, some of the same information that you used in the last couple studios regarding a recipe and the author and their website. And they tell you, just get that information and go ahead and add it to recipe.js wherever it's appropriate. You're just hard coding it in. It's not something that they're having you retrieve, fetch it or bring it in from anywhere else. They want you to just kind of add it wherever it goes. So I went ahead and did that part ahead of time so that I wouldn't have to do it for you here. But you can see I added, the author link, author photo, and author name here. Further down, I added my list of ingredients as an array here. I inserted the title and the description here in the recipe description component that they created. In the recipe photo component, I added the source to that image. And then this last one, recipe display, is something that kind of puts it all together with the photo and the description. And so all of that ultimately over in the app.js file is brought in here as recipe display. Then there's these other two components, board assignment and status change. This is what is completely new for this particular studio. So we're going to be adding some extra content to the page. So once you have gotten to the point where you have updated this, we can move on to the board assignment. There is a couple more things that I wanted to do. I believe I've already done part of it. Let's see, go back to recipe here. Yes. My photos came in really large, just like they did with the first studio. So I set the height on this one to 450 pixels. And let's see, the other one, I set the width at 200 pixels. And that's going to help contain that size a little bit better than it is otherwise. And there's one more thing I want to do. You'll notice I have a lot more than 5 ingredients here. And this is hard-coded to just display the first 5 out of that array. So, something we learned in React Part 2 was how to map over an array like this to produce those list items dynamically. So I'm going to say let ingredient list items. I already have a variable called, ingredients. So I want to be real specific to say this is actually the list items that I'm creating, the JSX. And I'm going to take ingredients and map over it. And I'm going to take both each element I'll call ingredient, and then I'm also going to capture the index out of this map function so that I can use that as a key, because React does require a key when you loop and produce multiple iterations of the same JSX. So I can just return that list item with a key that is the index. And then in between that, I'll just put whatever the ingredient is on that iteration. And then it's going to loop through all these ingredients and produce a new list item element here for every single one. So now down here, I can replace this hard-coded section with ingredient list items. And that should then show up on the page in their place. Now, I do already have this app up and running, and you'll notice that it says it's compiled with problems because the board assignment file has something that's not defined but is trying to be used. and board name. And over in status change, there's something called notes that's not defined. And the instructions tell you this. They tell you, if you run the app, it's still going to have problems. So we need to move on and, continue developing this. I personally am a big fan of being able to, see what I'm working with. And you could kind of see it behind there without having those errors. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to go over to board assignment and I'm going to find both instances there of board name. And I'm going to say, okay, this is the code that is causing the problem because it's trying to use this board name that doesn't exist yet because we haven't put it there. I'm just going to comment that out. And then I'm going to do the same thing. You'll notice here it's updated now. And it says that the only problem left is in status change and its notes, right? So I'm going to go over to status change and find the notes. This actually tells us it's on line 14. So I can go find line 14 and see right here that it's trying to access a value for this notes here, but we don't actually have that. So I'll just go ahead and take this whole form out. So I'm just going to comment those out and then refresh this. Now that we've fixed all of that. And now you can see what we've done so far. So I put in all of my information. It's displaying here. It looks very similar to what we did in the first studio. But you'll notice down here, we have these two new components, the board assignment on the left and the recipe, what is it called? Status change. There we go. The status change component here on the right. So this is what we're going to be working on. And as we do it, we should be able to see our changes updating, which is a really good development strategy to be able to actually keep an eye on what you're doing on the page as you're adding things in. Okay, so this status change, we can leave this the way that it is for now and come back over here. And now I'm going to bring this back in because we are about to address this. We are going to make it so that this board name actually has a definition that's being declared above. But we're going to have a few things to do here to take care of these other constants here, boards and this handler function that currently exists, but doesn't have anything inside the body. So let's go see what they want us to do. Okay, so if we go to boardassignment.js, we are going to brainstorm 3 boards that our recipe might belong to. Now, keep in mind, this is based on kind of a Pinterest idea, right? Where you have pins and you have boards. And the first thing they want us to do here is, this boards array, we should be putting in 3 objects that represent 3 boards. So I might have, a board for new recipes, and maybe I've got another one that's just for desserts. So we can, come up with objects, and it says each one needs to have a label property and a value property because they're going to be used in correspondence with options for a select menu, a drop-down menu that the user can select which board they want to save to. So we're going to have these options available with this array. So let's do that part first. We'll come in here and just get this data set up. So I can, start a new object and say I want the label to be, new recipes to try. And then the actual value behind the scenes in that option will be, new recipes. They need to be strings. Okay. And so I can have 3 of these with different values. I'm just going to copy these down here and just change these. So let's say this one is called desserts. And then I'll give it a value. And then here's the label for the third one. Let's call this potluck possibilities. Okay. So now we have the data that we need to set up our options for our dropdown. So down here in the select, you'll see that we have a dropdown select started, and it even has, a value that should correspond with that variable that doesn't exist yet. And it also is connected to the handler that doesn't have any content yet, but we're going to go ahead and get it set up with its options that need to be in here. If you remember, select is a wrapper element that should have a series of options, and that is, one for each thing that gets displayed. So if we come over here to the instructions, they say, use an option tag for each item in board, and then make sure that they're going to go between that select tag pair. And they need to have the value from the array of objects, and they need to have the right label. And of course, if we have an array, you know what that means. We're going to map through it to create these. And then we can, create one for each object in here, and then place all of them together down here. So let's do it with JavaScript here first. And I'm just going to say, const or let, it kind of doesn't matter. We can say, let board options. Why don't we just call it board options? And we'll say we want to go to boards and map over it. And I'm going to say for each board, let me think about this. We need a key since we're mapping. So I'm going to actually add the second index here as a parameter so that we can access that. Okay. So for each one of these, we're going to return an option tag with the key of index and the value of board.value. And then the actual label is what goes between here, between the option tags. So I'm going to say board.value. Okay. So just to recap, we are looping through this boards array right here. We're going object by object, and for every single object, we're going to grab the value in the label and apply it to the appropriate places here for this option. And then we'll have a group of options, one for each one of these, that's going to get placed down here. So this is where we make use of board options that now represents all of those. I'm just going to place it between the select tags and say board options right there. Okay. So if we go to our page, we're still going to have an error because we have not yet created the board name variable. And I had, previously commented this out to make this go away, but I have brought it back. So let's take care of that now. Actually, well, let me not jump the gun. Let me make sure. Do they want us to do the handler next? Well, okay, it's all, part and parcel. Okay, that's fine. So basically they're saying, board name has not been declared, right? So we want to start with this by declaring it as a state variable and give it a setter, and then make use of the use state hook. It says we should set the initial value to no boards yet. Okay, so we can do that. And typically state variables are declared at the top of your component. So I'm going to do it here and say const, and we'll call it, they want us to call it, oh yeah, board name. I know this because it's the one that it's waiting for. And I'm going to say set board name. It's a common convention to use the exact same name and just put set in front, and then just make sure it's proper camel case. And then that's deconstructing these two things from use state. You'll notice that use state has already been imported up here at the top for you in the starter code. So all we have to do here is give it the initial value, and we'll say no boards yet as the starting value until the user actually picks something and our handler reassigns the value. Okay, so we have something that exists. If we go now, we should see that this is no longer broken. And it says saved to no boards yet. But we do see here that we have all of this, and it looks like it's giving us the values here instead of the labels. That's interesting. Let me check this out for a second here. Board.value, oh, that's my fault. I chose value twice instead of choosing label. And some of you probably caught that as I was doing it and said, whoa, that's the wrong one. And I did eventually discover it. Okay, that's fine. So now if we go back, there we go. So now we see our labels: new recipes to try, desserts, potluck possibilities. That's what I was expecting to see is the actual label for the option that is visible to the user, whereas the value is what you want it to be behind the scenes. Okay, so we have our dropdown working. We have our variable that's now storing that board name, which cleared up the errors here where it was waiting for that to be defined here and here. And it's showing us the current value. So now the thing to do is to actually make it functional. So this is where our select already has something here to detect the change event on change. And it says, anytime you detect a change, go and run handle change. So it's, running it, but there's nothing happening here yet, right? What we want to do is to say whichever one of these, we want to grab the value from the select for whichever one was currently actually selected by the user, and then we're going to use the setter up here, set board name, to change the value, update the value of this. And because this is a state variable, React will automatically re-render the component when this is updated. So let's come in here and we're going to say, set board name. And the thing we want to set it to, now this is where your knowledge of the DOM needs to come in, and they do tell you this in the instructions. So if you didn't remember, it's okay, because they tell you right here, use event.target.value. That basically says we're passing in this event here as a parameter from, which is something that the browser handles for you. Anytime it detects an event, it makes that event available to you with whatever, function you give it. When we were doing this in the DOM, you were adding a listener and you were handing it an anonymous function, and it looked an awful lot like this. And sometimes you needed to make use of the event. So this is just like that. So we're going to say set board name, and then we're going to give it the value event.target.value. So that says whichever one of the options, grab the value from that particular option and now set it so that it is, this is updated, the state variable is updated. So let's go see if it works. If it does, we should see this value down here change where it says saved to, we should see it updated with the new board name. Okay, so it says no boards yet. So I'm going to come in here and say, I want to choose desserts. And now it says saved to desserts. And if I select potluck possibilities, it says saved to potluck possibilities. Okay, so the next thing that we're going to do, now that that's all working, is to head over to the status change. So in status change, they want us to use useState again for two state variables this time, notes and recipe status. The initial value of notes should be an empty string, and the initial value of recipe status should be false. Okay, so we can head over to here. And again, up here at the top above our handlers, I'm going to set these. So we'll have notes and set notes deconstructed from useState. Oops. And it says to set the initial value here to an empty string. The second one is recipe status. And set recipe status, which are being deconstructed from useState. And the starting value should be false, Boolean false. Okay, so that gives us a start here on actually having this available. So let's we can bring this back in here now that notes exists, and so it shouldn't cause us an error. And then, sorry, losing control of my mouse. Okay. And now we can see, have you tried this recipe? Add your notes here, and then it gives you a little thing. Now, right now, if I start, writing something in like, well, it's not even letting me add anything. So that's because the value of this input is actually tied to notes. And so it's only going to display whatever we change. So that means that we need to update our handlers. So let's go to the next thing. It says for handle change, update the value of notes to event.target.value. And then for handle submit, We're going to use event prevent default from so the browser won't refresh everything. And then we'll update recipe status to true using its setter. So let's do handle change. We already have the event being passed in as a parameter. So we can just go to set notes and set it to event.target.value. So it'll grab the current value that's being typed in on this input and update it. And this particular way this is being done, it's actually going to do it like character by character. So let's go see how this works. I can say needs more blueberries, and you can't see that it's being changed. It's happening behind the scenes. So let's go update the JSX so that it'll actually update on the page as well. Okay. So right down here at the bottom, we can, have this right down here at the bottom, we can change this, and let's do a ternary here. So I'm gonna put this inside a JSX placeholder, and I'm gonna say, does notes have a length? Is it still an empty string, or does it have a length now? If it does have a length, I'm going to say, let's give us the value of notes. Otherwise, I'm going to say, the original phrase, my recipe notes aren't here. So let's go look at that. Okay. Yeah, and now you can see that it's displaying it down here. And if I come in and I change it and I blank it back out, now it's an empty string again. So it shows the other message. And I could, tastes delicious. And it's updating right there on the page as I type. That's what that handler is doing for us. Okay, so the other handler, the handle submit, they told us to first use event prevent default so that it won't, the browser won't automatically refresh the page when a submit happens, because that's its natural behavior. And then we want to use set recipe status to true. That is all well and good, but we don't have anything down here to actually reflect that. All it says right now is I have not tried this recipe. So let's do the same thing we did before. I'm going to set a JSX placeholder here. And I also need to put this in quotes, actually. All right. And we're going to say recipe status and question mark. Remember, that's a Boolean. It's either true or false. So if we have actually set that to true, then we want to say, something like, I tried the recipe. Otherwise, we can say, I have not tried this recipe. And it looks like I have an error somewhere, or maybe this just needs to be refreshed sometimes. Yeah, it just needed refreshing. Okay, let me completely restart it so that we can go back to having nothing here. Okay, so my recipe notes aren't here. I have not tried this recipe. So first we'll update the first one just by starting to type and say, blueberries. And then I'm going to hit enter, or you can type for submit. And that's what causes it to update this second section down here with, I tried the recipe. Okay, so that I believe is it. Yep, that's the last of it. So, we had a couple of new components. We were able to work with state variables and handlers and actually affect changes on the page, which is pretty awesome. So I encourage you to keep playing around with these things. This is what makes React so great. It manages all of this in the virtual DOM and updates things behind the scenes very quickly and makes a page very responsive. All right, I hope this has been helpful.